As Elizabeth was just saying, we have another John the Baptist story, and I think sometimes it's good just to take a moment to set the scene here. John the Baptist is in a place that is considered Bethany beyond the Jordan, and that just sounds so epically far. It's just immediately on the east side of the Jordan River, north of the Dead Sea there. It is 27 miles from Jerusalem. So now, mind you, these visitors to John the Baptist are doing this on foot. So 27 miles from Jerusalem is a fancy way of saying it's a 54-mile round trip on foot kind of endeavor. So you can imagine, as they were planning in Jerusalem as to who they were going to send to talk to John the Baptist, it was probably the guy who was late to the meeting that got assigned the job, right? And Jerusalem is at about 2,500 feet, and Bethany beyond the Jordan is at about 1,250 feet below sea level. So 3,750 feet. Now, the last time that I was in the Holy Land, we did drive from Jerusalem down to the Dead Sea. Down is the operative word. Every mile you are driving, you are thinking, we have to drive back up out of this. And this isn't some 70-degree kind of place out for a pleasant stroll. It's a lot of heat, it's a lot of sun, and it's all down until it's all up. So we get a bit of that tone. We picture these kind of trail-weary people showing up to talk to John the Baptist, and they're not taking no for an answer because they know if they go back up to Jerusalem without information, the odds of them being sent on a second trip escalate dramatically, right? But who are you? Who are you? I am the voice of one who cries out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord. Make straight. We hear in this passage as well about light. Light has a lot to do with our paths. If the light is not strong, it's difficult to see where we are going. There's a lot of imagery at the very beginning of the Gospel of John in particular about this business of light. Jesus Christ being the light that is crashing into our world. We hear in other verses around our reading that the darkness of this world could not overcome it. But let's think of this business of light. I can think of a number of different instances in my life where light kind of stood out as a character or an event surrounding the issue of light. When I was a camp counselor at Mount Cross during my summers between years at Cal Lutheran, I would have a cabin of 8 kids. They were middle schoolers, sometimes high schoolers, sometimes older elementary kids. But it was particularly the older elementary kids that I remembered, because these kids had never had cause to use a flashlight in their entire lives. And they show up at camp and they've got a brand new flashlight with brand new batteries, right? And so the first night as we head to campfire in the evening, every last one of them is at the door of the cabin ready to go. Now, one of the things that's kind of exciting about a flashlight is that they work best when they're pointed at the ground in front of you as to where you're walking. They don't work as well when they're focused in the counselor's face or in your friend's face. Then they lose a lot of their power. In fact, when the light goes away then, you can't see anything to save your life because you've just been blinded. This focus on excitement with the light. When we think about the light of Christ, the light is not so much about Christ, but what Christ is shining upon. I'm mindful of a story from my first parish. We had a construction project there, not terribly unlike our project that we had here. It involved the parking lot and classrooms and other elements. And I remember the architect discussing the issue of lighting in a space. He said the goal of lighting is to see lit spaces. It is not to see lights. Think about that. It's to see lit spaces, but not to see lights. When we take a look at the different options that we have in regards to light, we think of all of the things that can be shown with light, right? We think of all of the elements that come to mind, all of the things that might be brought to light, we might say. All of the things that we can suddenly see, right? Things that were perhaps hidden previously. Now, when we think of the text that we have today, and we think of the light of Christ coming, we think of all of these glorious things that might happen. But I think it's important that we pull in from our first reading from Isaiah. In the story that we have about the people of Israel returning to Jerusalem, things are not a big party. Things are hard. There is oppression. There is pain. There is all kinds of things that are happening that are causing difficulty and trauma, imprisonment for the people of Israel. There are a number of things that are causing challenge and hardship. When we take a look at this idea of shining light down, the light is shining on the path of Christ and all of the amazing things that Christ is doing. However, we're also seeing all the mess, all of those people bound, those who are brokenhearted and oppressed, those who are struggling. When we think about our own world in this time and place, there is a lot of bondage. There is a lot of brokenness when we talk about all of the issues related to COVID and the restrictions and all of the fear and all of the death and all of the illness. We think in our world of all of the injustice when we think of those who are able to borrow for homes and those who cannot. When we think about what employees make versus what they should make. When we think about how miserable and difficult our health system is. There are all kinds of ways in which light shines and exposes brokenness in our world. I'm mindful as we think in the text today of release of the captives, of the dreadful rush in these weeks to line up executions of prisoners in the United States. Something that is not done in modern nations, and yet we are racing to schedule them. When this light comes down, everything is brought to light. Now, we can stop there and think, is it better if I can't see? Or is it better if I can? In many ways, though, it is profoundly better that we see. Because when the light comes, the path can be made straight. And not only do we see the brokenness of this world and life, we see God at work in this world and in this life. Pictures yesterday of FedEx and UPS trucks backed up to loading docks where they are taking on vaccine dosages to be shipped all over the United States is certainly something that we can celebrate. But that's not it. We think of new lives coming into being every day, small crying voices and the joy that they bring. There are all kinds of ways in which we can celebrate the light of Christ shining on Christ's work in this world. And I think the challenge is for us to remember that that light brings hope and it brings vocation to us. Not only can we see where Christ is at work, we can see where we are being called to work with Christ. As we move through these last days of Advent, be mindful that even though the days are getting darker, the days are coming soon when they will be lighter. We will see it outside with the sun and the moon, but we also see it in our world as we, as people of faith, roll up our sleeves and see the light of Christ and join in that work. So I would encourage you to think of a couple of things. See all of the things that Christ is bringing to light. Celebrate where Christ is bringing joy and life and relief and comfort and release. And be ready to work in the places that are still in need of those things. Amen. Please stand as you are able.